Hi, my name is Peter Woodbury, and I am the host of Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce, which you can find at edgarcayce.org/reflections. And so once a month, you'll be able to tune in, and I'll be interviewing luminaries in the field, mystics, psychics, folks of all different walks that are interested in metaphysics and the New Age and the Cayce work. If you don't know much about myself, let me introduce myself to you. I have been part of the organization for about 15 years now. I came here from Boston, where I went to college and graduate school, but my metaphysical interest started probably in childhood with my great-grandmother, who was a medium. And so when you have a grandmother or great-grandmother figure who has imaginary friends, it's quite interesting. It draws your attention even as a 4 or 5-year-old. And so along that process, just metaphysics and ESP was a hobby. I learned about Edgar Cayce in college and then pursued it more in depth after graduate school when I met Harmon Brough at a lecture. And then I read There Is a River, and that was a game changer. And for about 7 years, all I read was Cayce work. My friends thought I was strange. Now they thought I was off the deep end with this Cayce work. But started coming here, joined a Search for God group, going on A.R.E. tours, and made the decision to become part of this work and move here. And it's been a wonderful journey. I've done all sorts of things here at the organization, from facilitating conferences to overseeing the visitor center. And I'm very excited for this new venture with Reflections. And I've been interviewed many times, and so it's a new experience for me, getting a chance to pick the brains of the interesting people that you will get to meet on this show. So I look forward to this experience and sharing it with you. Once again, you can find it at edgarcayce.org/reflections. Hello and welcome to Reflections. Today we have M.K. Welsch, and she is here to talk with us about her book, Sacred Journey. So welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Peter. I'm delighted to be here.
Great, great. So tell me a little bit about this book. What was the inspiration of it, and what are your thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, you know, I've been a student of the Cayce material for years and learned a lot. It's helped me a whole lot. But I always felt that there was a book that needed to be written that kind of brought the whole picture together, picture of the soul. And in fact, I had a good friend quite a few years ago who said to me that she had started investigating the Cayce material, and she loved parts of it, but she couldn't kind of bring it all together to make it make sense for her and how it would apply in her life. So I kept waiting and waiting for the book to be written, and I finally realized that I had to write it myself. So I decided to do that, and what I was really trying to do, Peter, was to weave together the story of the soul. You know, Edgar Cayce gave over 14,000 readings to different people over the course of decades. And so there are little bits and pieces scattered here and there throughout the readings about what he said, about why we're here on earth, why are we here, what are we supposed to do, what is this lifetime all about. So I was trying to bring together those pieces, weave them together into the story about our movement, the soul's movement and consciousness through time and space, and in particular to look at it through the lens of the master soul, the soul that became Jesus the Christ.
So say more about that. What do you think is unique in Cayce's readings about the master soul, and what do you think how do you think it's relevant today?
Well, one of the things that Edgar Cayce does, he takes a different tack. I mean, he was a churchgoer his whole life, but the things that you find in the reading take a different tack in terms of the perspective on Jesus. He looks upon Jesus and talks about the fact that he came here. This was a soul. He calls it this entity the first begotten of God, the first soul, and as such, he's our elder brother. And he came to earth over 2,100 years ago in Nazareth. He chose to come back to earth to help us, his sisters and brothers, find our way out. You know, because what we're really here, and one of the things that the Cayce readings talk about, is the fact that we're in the earth like this in order to come back to God consciousness. In the Bible, it's the story of the prodigal son, the son who had everything with his father and left home thinking that he could find something better out there, and then he loses his way. He gets lost, and suddenly he's even eating with the swine, and really at a low point until he, and the Bible puts this beautifully, he came to himself and he realized, I don't have to be out here. I can be with my father again. So he turns for home, and even before he makes it home, his father comes out to greet him, to give him the royal robe and the ring of sonship. And so what the Jesus soul did, that entity did, Cayce talks about it in terms of reincarnation, that this soul, like us, came incarnated on earth many times, and to fully develop himself and to become to the state of consciousness that we call a Christ consciousness, which is the total conscious union with God. That's what he achieved, and that's what he came to teach us how to do. Cayce calls him the pattern, and I think that's kind of unique to the Cayce materials in a way that this entity, this soul came and showed us how to do it. Now it's up to us. He left us with the responsibility to do it ourselves.
Oh, that's wonderful, because I think that Cayce's work really does take Jesus out of maybe like mere Christianity and puts him into this like reincarnation, past life perspective.
And there are many other things about that he lets us know about Jesus that aren't found in most mainstream churches. He really, Cayce's readings really make Jesus part of a human community. We found out he had a family. I mean, that's stated in the Bible, but he had friends, he ate with people. One of the great things I love about the Cayce readings is that he talks about Jesus in terms of his sense of humor. He says he laughed even on the way to Gethsemane. And, you know, he had challenges, like we all do. I'm sure he was frustrated sometimes with, you know, he had his apostles and disciples, and he kept telling them again and again and again, and they just didn't get some of the things that he was saying. He was abandoned by his friends at one of his direst moments. But the wonderful thing, too, about the Cayce readings, you know, Jesus says in the New Testament, excuse me, be perfect as I'm perfect. And in most churches, that's considered blasphemous for any of us to think that we could come to a state of perfection. But the Cayce readings take a whole other view about it, you know, and they say, in terms of things like reincarnation, we can do this. We've got to put our shoulder to the wheel, we've got to try, we have to keep an ideal, a spiritual ideal out in front of us and work toward that ideal to get there. And as you had mentioned, he also talks about Jesus in a very ecumenical terms. He says, the Christ was the power and Jesus was the man. And it doesn't matter if you're Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or even an atheist, that same power is available to you if you'll but seek it.
That's great, because, you know, as I go out and talk on the Cayce material and share some of this, I get asked all the time if there's a book that has this outline. So it's great that you put this together and made it accessible so that, like your friend said, there's just a way to put these pieces together. You know, because I know that I grew up Catholic, and in that kind of tradition, you know, Jesus, when I'd hear the name Jesus, it was like, Jesus, you know, it was kind of like I would cringe. And I found that through Cayce's material, Jesus is really brought into humanity, and it's a different message that you get.
Very much so. It's to think of him as truly our elder brother. He's there to help us, to help guide us. He's saying to us, I did it, you can do it too. He's, you know, encouraging us. And always, I know you had mentioned Catholicism and, you know, other churches as well, we tend to get caught up into this situation where we feel like, oh, I've done something wrong, I have to worry, I have to worry. And the message that the Christ brought forth was, you never have to worry, you're always forgiven, you're always loved, I'm always here to help you. I mean, what a different perspective that gives us, that we're not climbing up this cliff, that we're never going to make it to the top. It's like, I'm here. And what he achieved in terms of, his message was God with us, because he achieved that conscious union with God. So he's telling us, you don't have anything to worry about. Your Father's right here, your Father, Mother, God, helping to take care of you. So it's just a beautiful, it's just a lovelier, more loving message that helps us not take ourselves so seriously as well.
Now, the subtitle of your book is uses the word enlightenment, or path to enlightenment. Could you say more about that? Because I think people, that's mostly thought of like in an Eastern tradition, or the Buddha or something like that.
I think most of us think of, when we think of the term enlightenment, we think of it in terms of like a religious guru who's meditating for days in a rocky cave or something like that. And most of us think, oh, I could never do that. And we're probably right. We probably couldn't do that. But I think of it more, it's really more coming to consciousness. I kind of like to think of it sometimes as, you know, when you see one of those cartoons, and there's a cartoon character where a light bulb suddenly goes on over its head. It's like that aha moment where we say, oh, I see, God is with me. And, you know, that's really what Jesus proved. He made that connection. And he taught us what enlightenment was. And in my opinion, what he taught and showed us by example is this attitude that every moment, 24 hours a day, 24/7, we are loved, and we are, enlightenment means being conscious of God throughout all of that time. So the secondary, and one of the themes of the book, and a theme running throughout the Cayce readings, is the idea of meditation, because how do we achieve that state? How do we achieve that God contact? It's through meditation. And one of the reasons is Jesus had also said that the temple, God is within us, the temple is within. So if that temple is inside here, that God resides inside here, it means we have to calm down, close our mind to this outside world, and go, where are we going to find our God? By going within. And that's what meditation is all about, because the spark of God that's burning in the soul, that's where you're going to find it. And when we do touch that fire, that holy fire inside there, it transforms us. But then the Cayce readings add another little appendix to that. They say, once you've touched that holy fire and make your contact with God, then it's up to your responsibility. It's up to you to bring the candle flame of love that you have found out into the world.
Yes, the will.
The will. And to apply what you know. That's a huge part of the Cayce material.
Now, what was your path to Edgar Cayce? And was it the Jesus material, the spiritual material that most resonates with you? Because, you know, there are 10,000 different subjects.
There's so many things in the Cayce so much in the Cayce material. Well, actually, you know, I grew up Catholic as well. And then I guess around college age or whatever, I started seeking, because it just wasn't giving me everything that I felt that I needed. Although I have always said to people who said, oh, you grew up Catholic and you went to Catholic schools, that one of the best things about growing up that way was, at least in our household, my parents were very devout Catholics, we were always told, we were always meant to know that there was something more than just this, more than the here and now. And whether you appreciated going to church on Sunday or not, the underlying premise was, it's not just about us. There's something bigger and more important in this universe than just individual me. So searching led me to look at Eastern religions and lots of different things, and then someone introduced me to the Cayce material. I started reading those books, and you know how that is. As a spiritual searcher yourself, the books sometimes seem to just fall off the bookshelf. And when I entered the Cayce material, I thought, because I really didn't know much about it, and it's, you know, when you first enter it, it feels a little weird. This thing called psychic and all of that, which was not given any credence. Exactly. Like that, and especially in mainstream religions. So I said to myself, if I ever find anything in this material that doesn't resonate with my highest sense of good, I'm out of here. And I just never have, Peter.
Kind of like what Cayce said about giving readings.
Exactly.
If you ever gave a reading that went against his Christian faith.
And it takes you deeper and deeper. And the wonderful thing is, no matter how you come to this material, no matter what faith tradition you come from, or maybe you don't even believe in a God, but you find something here. You're welcome.
Now, did you, how did you resonate with reincarnation? Did you have to kind of take a pause and kind of reflect on that?
Actually, I think when the first time I really heard it explained to me from kind of the perspective of the Cayce material, it began to make sense. Life began to make more sense because, you know, even when I was little, I would say to myself, but, well, why are some babies born with a bad leg or something like that? And some of those kinds of things seem to fall into place. It's like, oh, maybe our soul chose some of these things, not just so that we could come in and suffer, but sometimes we choose some of these things to help others on their way. So if you look at the big picture, if you look at the whole panoply of the philosophy, it's like, oh, this makes sense. And when Cayce talks about Jesus again, and he says, you know, Jesus had other lifetimes. He developed himself. He was Joseph of the coat of many colors in the Old Testament, and he was Joshua with the ancient Israelites. You begin to step back and see, oh, it's not like a closed system. I have a say in this, and what I choose to do, the choices I make every day, can take me to a higher level.
Now, one of the emphasis in the Cayce work is on purposes, life purpose. And I know that you touch upon that. Could you say more about that? What you think our purposes are here on the earth? How did we end up in this place?
In this place,
Right,
oy vey.
And Jesus had to come to show us the way out.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, or what does Cayce have to say
Well,
about that?
he talks about, as I mentioned about the story of the prodigal son or whatever, he talks about the fact that we're all on this movement toward, we're all on our own individual sacred journey. Whether we know it or not, we're moving back toward the divine spirit that we left. And we left it in consciousness. I mean, the story in the Bible about Adam and Eve is a metaphor for that, but what we really did was leave that God consciousness. And when we come to Earth, one of the things that we come here to do is one of our purposes. Well, actually, I'll divide it into two buckets. I think there are two different ways that you can talk about purpose from the Cayce perspective. One is the big picture, overarching purpose that Cayce talks about on this road back to God consciousness that every soul is on earth to do. And the way he explains it is to say, to know ourselves, to be ourselves, yet one with God, which means to know the individuality of our own souls, to be aware and conscious of that, but to also know at the same time that we are one with God. That's the big picture purpose. The other purpose is more individualized and specialized. It's the one that we each came to Earth to give a gift, make some kind of contribution that's going to uplift the whole. It doesn't matter, we could be an engineer building a bridge, a hairdresser, a school teacher, a stockbroker, a homemaker, a caregiver, or even a world leader. All of us, before we came, every soul made a compact with the universe to help come and lift up everyone and contribute their gift through whatever expression they've chosen, life path or career in this lifetime. So it gives us a whole lot of hope. We're here for something. This life has a purpose, and there's the larger one, and hopefully the smaller one. What we choose to do every day in the individualized expression that we bring our self to every day is contributing to the larger purpose that we have of finding our God again.
Now, how do you, I mean, what I hear a lot, and you probably, I mean, we're all feeling it, is that we're living in such a, feels divisive, that there's, people have strong opinions about all sorts of different things. And what do you think about, how do you see your material, your book, and the Cayce material? Does it speak to anything of the times we're living in, or any of this, you know, how could we benefit from these teachings in these trying times that we're living in?
Well, I think one of the things that Cayce, and you know, Jesus kind of turned over the keys to the kingdom to us, and Cayce echoes that idea. And so I think it's really about the peace that we want to find, the calmness, the comfort, the hope that we want to find is in here, because that's where God is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's up to us in terms of the choices that we make every day. We can either, it's almost like we can play in the field of the mind, the
Mm-hmm.
human mind,
Mm-hmm.
which are opinions and arguments and details and
Right.
intellectualism and all of that.
Separateness.
Divisiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can come back within and we can make choices to act from that place.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, let's face it, most of us, if we sit down with somebody whose opinions are opposite ours, we're not going to change their opinion.
Right.
But our being, our very presence, what we emanate from within, and Cayce talks about this, is going to have an impact far greater than we can ever imagine. That's, he said, there's, you know, there can't be peace in the world until there's peace in us. There can't be love and friendship. He says, if you want to have friends, be a friend. It all comes, and that's really what our elder brother was telling us.
Like changing people by example.
Exactly.
Rather than by
And
words.
just really, I mean, what Cayce talks about, things like energy and vibrations, it really is sometimes what you emanate. If you look at a person like even Mother Teresa, or even I think now Pope Francis, they just, what they're emanating from their very being is so powerful that it has an effect on people. So it's not about me going to change the world and change somebody's mind over here. It's me being who I'm truly meant to be, and that's huge.
Yes, it is. Now, what have you been hearing back? Like, what's been the resonance from your book? Like, have you been getting emails, or what's been the, what have you heard
I've had
from
some
people?
feedback, and I feel very honored and lucky that it's been good.
Well, I've heard that you probably know that, or maybe you don't, that June Bro has your book on her nightstand. So that's quite a high compliment.
Yeah,
I
she
think.
had told me that, and I'm quite honored and humbled by that. A couple of things I've heard that have, well, I guess surprised me. Well, one that surprised me is that people say they find humor in it, and I guess I wasn't trying to be humorous, so I'm thinking, well, what did I say? But I'm glad.
Right.
The other thing is there are a few groups that are actually, and I did get an email from one woman who said that she and a small study group, I'm not sure if it's a Cayce study group, doesn't matter, but she and her spiritual study group are using it within their group. They'll read a portion of it and then discuss it.
Yes.
And I find that, you know, quite humbling, and because I had never thought of that. And but it pleases me that they're finding some ideas in there to chew on. But I do have to step back and say, yeah, I put the book together, but I tell people it's like I was given all these beautiful pieces of silk, and I sewed them together in a certain pattern. Someone else would sew them in a different pattern, but how can you go wrong with Edgar Cayce and Jesus Christ? I mean,
And I think that what's drawn me and a lot of us is a lot of the things that Edgar Cayce says. I mean, many of them are unique and new, but a lot is not unique. That you'll find some of these truths in other places, but the way that Edgar Cayce has weaved it together is what I think is unique. And so I wouldn't poo-poo your book at all because of the way that you've synthesized the material. I think that that's creative, to put it in a way, and especially to put it in a way that takes this, you know, a lot of people find, like, you know, the Cayce material inaccessible, that the language, and so being able to put these important concepts in a book that anyone can read, and in some ways making these complex material accessible, I think that's remarkable.
well, thank you very much. I think, you know, one of the biggest things that the Cayce material does is wonderful, and it inspires us, but it all comes back to here to say, okay, now you know this, it's up to you to do something about it. So that's really, I mean, we can, it's wonderful to be able to have pulled that together, but now I stand back and also go, wow, we've got a big responsibility, all of us on this earth.
Now, what was the, like, I've been trying to write a book. If they introduce me another time with Peter's working on his first book one more time, I'm going to scream. But what was that process like for you? I mean, for me, it's just for me it feels daunting. That how do you take all of this and put it into chapters? And how was that for you?
Well, it presented some challenges. I have to say that I had a kick in the rear to get started finally. It'd been in the back of my mind.
Was that unseen forces or seen forces?
Well, that was seen and unseen. I was laid off for my job.
So spirit worked in mysterious ways, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So in late 2011, and
I hope Kevin's not listening. Yeah. Let's lay him off. Maybe he'll write that book.
But so I thought at the time, okay, now I can really focus on this. And I purposely decided not to look for another full-time job, to look for a freelance work so that I would have some unstructured time. But I'd been collecting different material.
Do you see that as
years.
Synchronistic that happened? That on the surface maybe it looked like, in the moment, like there's
on the surface it was very difficult.
Yeah, there's a philosopher who says life only makes sense when we look backwards, but unfortunately we have to live it going forwards.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like
say
there was a blessing there that created the space to write this book.
Oh, it really did. It really did. I mean, I can't say that I wasn't devastated when I first lost the job, and all the anchors that you kind of have in your life are like, oh no, what now? But it did give me the space to do that. But secondarily, I had been collecting. They still have it on an app, which is wonderful, called the Thought for the Day for Cayce. Yeah. And I would get that, and it would come over the transom on my email at work. For years, I was getting this, and there would just be, every once in a while, there would be one that I'd say, oh, that one, I held on to it. So I had this stack of those papers, and then a lot of other stuff. So trying to put it in some kind of semblance of order took a while, and I can't say that I didn't have those moments when I was sitting in front of my computer. I would tell my friends that I was going to become one of those people that, you're alone, sitting in front of your computer at home, and it's like, I'm going to be one of those people who are looking out the window going, get off my lawn, because you just want to get away from it. So
you've had an immaculate house, all the laundry was done.
Or thinking about, now what's down in the refrigerator I could eat? But a good thing, I felt like I had help from above as well. And I also was told at one point, don't judge it as you go along. Because I would stop myself sometimes I'd put something down and write it and then be like, oh no, this isn't good, and your mind just starts going and going and going. So that, excuse me, that helped to say, give each piece its proper place. And don't be premature in saying what it is or isn't.
Now, as in this process, did you begin the outline of a follow-up book? Is there a second book, or you kind of, it's like having a child, you're going to wait a couple years?
Wait till the labor pains are really gone.
You're going to think about that for a little while.
Well, when I finished it, I thought, I am never writing another book.
I've heard that.
Yes.
I don't know how Kevin and John do it.
I don't either. There may be one connected to this down the road. Right now, I'm collaborating with somebody on a book that's completely different, that again, I said to myself, I'm not writing a book. Well, I thought this was going to be an article, but it's turning into a book. It's about the Great Pyramid. So I don't know where that's going to go or what's going to happen with that. So we'll see. Yeah.
There can't be enough books about the Great Pyramid. There's so many
well,
fascinating
I hope.
stories and mysteries.
I have to finish it first, but that's another one. Again, you're in the middle of it going, oy vey, why did I start?
Now, how are you enjoying, because I know that we have an upcoming conference in April, the Sacred Journey. How are you enjoying public speaking about this? Because they're so different. Writing is a private experience, and then public speaking is that.
To tell you the truth, and I hope this doesn't discourage anyone from coming, this is going to be my first time speaking about it in that kind of venue.
Oh, good. Yeah. There's got to be.
I've done a couple of these kinds of interviews, but I haven't been up there on the stage trying to fill the time, so and trying to make the clicker work and all of those kinds of things.
Well, John and Kevin and I were often said, well, where are the strong women speakers coming out of A.R.E? So there's an audience waiting for you. Have you been approached to be speaking out on behalf of this book around the country?
No, not so far.
Ah.
Not so far. It's,
So you haven't put that out there quite yet?
I haven't put that out
Yeah,
there.
so in April, you'll have your,
I think
your inaugural
abject fear
voyage.
is keeping me from
What I've
pursuing.
learned, I call it, people ask me if I get nervous, I say, no, I get excited.
Oh,
So it's
that's
a nice
good way to
reframe.
look at it. I'll reframe
It's a reframe
it.
of nervousness.
Boy, I need
is
that.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, like they say with Shakespeare, it's the play that's the thing. And I think with Cayce, it's the material that's the thing.
Absolutely.
You know, in a way that you're a conduit for
Absolutely.
this wonderful material. So,
Exactly.
you know, in a way you can lose yourself in this
Yeah.
presentation of this.
And not
Yeah.
take responsibility for it, because the beautiful things came through him, through that beautiful soul who dedicated his life to
Yeah.
serving others. It's amazing. I mean, when you think about it, how many decades he did this, you know, twice a day usually, but near the end of his life, many more times a day. And he would go into this state of trance and not even know what he was saying. And to have that kind of commitment,
Yeah.
because it was helping other people, is just was awe-inspiring, actually.
Well, one of the readings that I resonate with a lot is the one where he said that in this material is that which can change the thought of mankind or humankind.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that's what you're really talking about. It's kind of a liberating theology,
Yeah.
because I think it's there's something about organized religions that wonderful in many ways, but in some ways have kind of compartmentalized.
Right,
I call it
narrowed
God.
it.
Well, God Inc. You know, it's
Right,
kind of
right.
like that
Right.
our religion is the best religion, and it really turns off, I think, the soul, to think
Right.
that God would ever, you know, not accept someone because they didn't know about Jesus or because they were in the wrong religion or something like that. And I think Cayce's work, like you've outlined, is not like that at all.
Not like that at all. No, it's really about, because a lot of the theology and all of that, it's really a product of the human mind. It doesn't say that there weren't inspiring things that come through, but it narrows us. And I feel like any religion, no matter what it is, or even if you don't have a religion, if you might find an idea in a novel, it should always be leading back to the God within. They're just guideposts.
Yes.
And we get all caught up in the community and all of the things that are going on between the human beings and all of that. But it's just supposed to be a guide. And the best roadmap is what Cayce said is the master soul, Jesus. So if you go back to that, those ideas, and he wasn't saying you have to be a Christian. He was saying, look at what this soul entity did and follow that pattern. So it's much broader. I mean, because in the end, how can you confine an eternal soul? You know, put labels on it or something. It's kind of silly when we think about it.
Now, is there anything else that in your book that we haven't touched on? Are there any other themes you'd want to express? I mean, we've talked about the prodigal voyage, kind of this oneness at the beginning, and then this how we've ended up. How did nice souls like us end up in a place like this? And then we've had to have that. You put it so beautifully the way in the Bible, as he came to himself. What does that mean to you when you think of coming to yourself?
That you suddenly open up inside to not see yourself as just this human form, but something
so
much
coming into
big-
the truth.
to the truth of who
all
you
of
of
you.
you really are. I mean, we
Like a
talk
child of the Most High. If you
exactly.
remembered that.
We talk about ourselves as human beings. Well, human, I think, is like the physical form, the thought forms, all of
Yes.
those kinds of things. And being is the
eternal.
eternal,
Yeah.
omniscient
Well,
consciousness
that's a beautiful
behind
way to
it.
put it.
You know, so, you know, there were just a few other kinds of characteristics or ideas that come from the Cayce readings, I think, you know, are touched upon, sometimes lightly, but it all fits together to create the whole panoply, I think, of the Cayce material. He talks about the idea that the opportunity to be on this earth, it is an opportunity to have this lifetime, because it's an opportunity for soul growth. And then he also says that the circumstances and conditions we meet in our lives, we're meeting ourselves. those people and situations and circumstances and problems and all of that are like mirrors held up so this soul can see what it needs to see.
So half the time that's great, and then half the time
exactly.
you don't
And
want to
again,
think that person's yourself.
it's coming towards that being conscious. It's maintaining that sense of consciousness to say, what am I supposed to learn here? Because the reason that I'm here is to learn and to grow and to give, to be of service. Another big idea that you're very familiar with in the Cayce readings is the idea of setting ideals. That's one of the most important things we could do to set a physical, mental, and spiritual ideal, and then use those ideals as like the lighthouse to navigate
That's game
through
changing.
life. Exactly.
Kind of orienting your life spiritually.
Exactly, exactly. But you know, underlying everything in the Cayce readings is the idea of love. Everything's seen through that filter. It underlies the idea of what God is. It underlies everything. Underlies the idea of why we're here, what we're doing here. The whole purpose is to be of service. And I really think if you look at a man like Edgar Cayce, who literally laid down his life, his outward external life every day in order to be of service to others, I mean, what a pattern that is in itself to follow. But that's what
Christ
it's about.
was his ideal.
Exactly. And he says that no one will get into heaven, that state of consciousness, no one will get into heaven unless they're leaning on the arm of someone they've helped. That's a pretty big statement. And the issue is, as I mentioned in the beginning, that there are so many wonderful books that have been written about the Cayce material where people have brought all of these kinds of ideas together. But there's still, 14,000 plus readings. Edgar Cayce passed on in 1945, and we've only begun to plumb the depth and breadth of everything that was said. So the issue is with a lot of these ideas is they're scattered among all of these readings, a little phrase here, another phrase there. So
yeah, it's true. I know there's a reading where Edgar Cayce says that that blueberries can cure some kind of disease that we haven't discovered yet. And nobody followed up and said, "What is it?"
Exactly.
So I have my blueberries every morning. Hope
Well,
I'm cured of something. I don't know what it quite is.
And that brings up another point that Cayce gave. I don't know. Maybe you know how many readings that were purely health readings.
Oh, about 2/3 of them.
About 2/3 of them were health readings, and all kinds of mental and physical diseases that people are still finding help from. And we don't even know the depth of everything that's there. We need to do so much research on these, but they are still helping people. But the striking thing he said about healing was that it all comes from within. Now, if you think about the idea that the God is within us, that makes a lot of sense. He says that the healing forces, it doesn't matter what medicine you use, what pill you take, what surgery, that the healing force actually is the creative force that's located in every cell of the body that awakens and we become healed. And I think, I touch upon this a little bit in the book, in my mind, that's how Jesus healed. He lifted people up so they could be aware of the God that was right there with them, and that transformed their consciousness and subsequently transformed their body. Because one of the other important ideas in the Cayce readings is about the power of the mind. He talks about the mind as the builder and says, the spirit is the life, the mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. So if you go back from there and you start with spirit, you realize how that cascades and has an impact on the world.
Yeah. So how do you, again, just coming into modern times, do you feel hopeful? Like, is there some, from the Cayce work, or as you see, consciousness at this time, do you have a sense of hope? Because I think that a lot of folks are debating that, whether are we turning,
sometimes.
are we going downhill, are we going uphill? And the Cayce material seems to say that we're on track, that we're moving in a positive direction. How do you see that?
Well, he talked about this time as that the souls that are here at this particular time on earth are lucky because there's going to be a spiritual awakening. And I think it's already started. And I think one of the reasons that the divisiveness has come is because some of these things that aren't so spiritually evolved have been raised to the light so that we can all see them, and we're going, that's not what's right. That's not who we are. So
I've heard it said it's like when you turn on the kitchen light and the cockroaches start running around. We're seeing all the cockroaches.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the Cayce readings are just full of hope, because he really, just as Jesus did, puts it on us. He says, you have the choice. All you have to do is keep trying. There's no God that's out there judging you. The idea of forgiveness, huge, and obviously huge in Jesus' teachings as well. It's like there's not some God out there who's judging you and telling you don't do this and you're bad and be ashamed and all of this. It's like no matter what you do, just like the prodigal son, just like the woman taken in adultery, you're forgiven. It doesn't count in the eternal scheme of the universe. It counts as nothing. Will help pick you up and get you on the road again. And there will be those, and will be situations and circumstances, if you're ready to turn back to the Father, in whatever way you think about that, there will be, the universe is skewed toward helping you. You will be lifted to find the right people, the right books, the right situation, whatever that you need to do. So there's ultimate hope, unending hope for all of us. And we're on this journey. Each of the journey looks a little different because we each have our own personal story, etc. But it all has the same destination. And we're all going to be coming together at that destination as one. And that's a really joyful kind of thought.
Yeah.
Not separate. You know, I think if there are any kind of idea I'd like to leave with people, especially for those who may feel like they've been harmed by religion, or how they're concerned about the way Jesus' words have been misinterpreted, especially in terms of things like sin and everlasting punishment and all of that kind of stuff. To just remember, we cannot be severed from our God. We are, right now, we are with the Father, Mother, God. We're only away from it in consciousness. And nothing we ever do or ever have done can ever be so bad that we're not taken back into the Father's arms. We are profoundly loved. And that gives me immense hope.
Well, that's a wonderful thought, perhaps to end on. So I look forward to hearing your inaugural Enlightened talk in April at the Sacred Journey Conference. I'll be there too. I'll be one of the speakers
I'm excited
there
about that.
too. So we'll share that. We'll share the Cayce light with those that.
I'm looking
that
forward
come.
to it.
So thank you. It's been wonderful for me to talk with you, and I'm very happy with your book, and look forward to that continuing to grow and more speaking opportunities for you as you fill yourself with that confidence.
Thank you, Peter. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.